what could I do to increase my score on this value by 0.5 tomorrow? Why do you want to do this? Why is this actually important to you? My top values were things like authenticity, connection, love, learning. Start small, focus on consistency, and then build that up.
Consistency and commitment is obviously a theme in each of our lives. And I think an opportune place to start would be with the question that I posed at the top. Is positive mindset psychology overrated?
Oh gosh, no, it's so underrated, especially among high achievers within the professions. I think probably athletes understand the importance of mindset, but when it comes to high achieving professionals, I actually think that most people have a completely backwards understanding of what type of mindset is necessary or even helpful to facilitate peak performance. And I think if you asked a lot of people, certainly in the legal profession, but other high achieving professions more broadly, they would say having a positive mindset will undercut my success and performance. And actually the opposite is true, and science shows it. So I think we need to get the word up and get the hype up about it.
So maybe you could help us by elaborating on that a bit. You mentioned the science, right? How did you stumble upon this field of positive psychology?
I stumbled upon it because I was doing the exact opposite of everything that I'm now teaching and coaching on. So when I was in college and law school and early in my legal career, I wore the perfectionism as a badge of honor. I believed that the road to success involved throwing myself 150% into my work, self-described raging overachiever, and I believed that positive mindset or doing anything for this to cultivate my well-being or positive emotions or give myself a sense of joy, meaning, connection, you name any positive feeling, or even being remotely nice to myself. I thought that all of those things were just trivial distractions or things that would actively push me off course. And it seemed to work really well for a time. So like you said, graduated Yale Law School, straight honors, 2 federal clerkships, big law job offer. Then it stopped working. And I ultimately hit a real breaking point, honestly, mentally and physically, and ended up discovering positive psychology, Googling how to be happy. Literally, I cannot make this up. I was Googling how to be happy when I was completely burnt out, and ended up enrolling in the certification program on positive psychology purely for my own edification. I really wanted to know how to be happy. I was the only lawyer in the program, and it completely blew my mind. And I realized that my entire experience up until that point would have been just infinitely better if I'd known those things. And I also realized that nearly every single lawyer or law student or other high-achieving professional student or professional that I'd met was just as ignorant in those regards. So I was like, all right, this pivot, law was clearly not working for me the way that I was doing. I want to bring this to the legal profession. And basically, in a nutshell, positive psychology, it's the scientific study of human flourishing. So if you think about traditional psychology, is operated around a disease model. So it's diagnosing and treating mental illness or bringing people from anxiety, suffering, depression to 0 or neutral. And positive psychology says, all right, well, neutral's fine, but how do we bring people from neutral or 0 or surviving to thriving or experiencing positive 10 maximum fulfillment? And what the science shows actually is not just how do we elevate people's well-being in that way, but why should we? And it shows the link between well-being and physical health, creativity, productivity, engagement, success in nearly every domain of life, including professionally. And so it really clearly and unequivocally shows that this whole mindset of I need to completely deprive myself of every aspect of my well-being to be successful is not only necessary, it's actually harmful. And that's well-being more broadly. We could talk about mindset in particular and the ways that we relate to ourselves and how counterintuitive the science is in terms of how it shows us that the mindsets that most high achieving professionals use to fuel their performance is actually so counterproductive, and that there's a much better way of doing it that many people assume will throw them off course, but would actually like catapult them upward.
I would love for the audience to understand why, when it comes to mindfulness and positive lawyering or positive psychology, why is value alignment so key? And what is value alignment?
The most important things and foundational tools or concepts that I teach on are: one is values alignment, and it goes hand in hand with replacing our perfectionist mindset with a more empowered one. And I'll tell you very specifically what I mean by perfectionist, because it's not what most people think. And the two actually go really well together. And I'll start with the second one. So the perfectionist mindset, it's not that we do everything perfectly. It's not that we have drive, determination, commitment to excellence. It's that we set these impossibly high standards for ourselves, but more importantly, that perfectionism is stemming from a deep-rooted feeling of fear of lack of worthiness and hustling to prove your worth. Our values are the things that we actually care about most deeply, that are most central to our sense of selves, and the things that we would care about, and be pulled to even if no one was looking, because they really matter to us, not because of any external pressures or what we feel like we should be doing. And all of the research shows that when we are honoring our intrinsic values, the ones that we've selected for ourselves, we are not only happier, we are healthier, and we experience peak motivation and performance. So it's a much better form of motivation than pay or fear of retribution or trying to impress others. Though, and there's great studies showing like those things can motivate us, but not optimally and not over the long term. And so if we can tap into these values, much better alignment. But the way that these things connect is that when we identify our core values and we find a way to connect them with whatever it is we're doing, and there's ways to do this that go beyond just like the surface level, like, oh, I have to be doing my passion project to be honoring my values. No, you can find all sorts of ways to tap into your values. And if you can do that, that gives you something to actually run towards rather than just running away from that fear of not being good enough. And that will make you way happier. And in fact, a study of over 6,000 lawyers found that authenticity or values alignment is the number one predictor of long-term lawyer well-being, but it will also make you so much more effective because it will turbocharge your motivation.
So, how does someone start to unpack their values? How do they start to identify? I mean, we talked about the intrinsic motivations, right? Like, I spend time in my life unpacking them for me. I've read books like The Body Keeps the Score. I've studied Stoicism. I was an SVU criminal prosecutor. Like, trauma is something I've studied and tried to understand deeply. Persuasion, the way you're talking about it in terms of performance. I mean, obviously, when someone live integrity, it's one of my favorite words. It means to be whole. It means to be one within yourself, right? So, like, how, and it's one of my values. So, how can people start to actionably and strategically identify their values in a way that helps them understand they're living from a place of intrinsic motivation?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I actually have a values discovery guide that I've created. And I'll tell you a little story and then I'll tell you about this. And you don't have to use my guide. There's other ways to do this. But the first time that I was ever introduced to the concept of values was, and I can tell you down to like the day, I don't remember what date it was, but it was the summer, my second summer of law school, when I was working at a big law firm. And finally, for the first time in my life, started working with a therapist, because I had committed to these 2 years of super, super prestigious clerkships after law school. And At this point, my anxiety was so high because everything that I was doing felt so wrong that it was starting to get to debilitatingly high levels. And I was honestly just like panicking about the prospects of my future and the road that I was just plowing down with no plans to stop, even though it felt so wrong. And one of the things that the therapist had me do that summer was a very basic values exercise where she gave me a list of like 100 values. They all sound positive. And so everything from family, love, connection to spirituality, success, teamwork, loyalty, excellence, growth, prestige, you name it, right? And she said, go through the list and check off every one that resonates with you and, check off 30 of them. And then she said, narrow it down to the 3 to 5 that are most important to you, which is hard, but I did it. And then she said, all right, now let's think about how, like, to what extent is what you're doing with all of your time and energy furthering those values or not? And what I realized in that moment was, first of all, my top values were things like authenticity, connection, love, learning. And I was at this point literally killing myself for these jobs. Like I was working every hour of the day. I had walled off every other single aspect of my life. I was a completely, uni focused. I graduated with literally straight honors. I got an embarrassingly high score on the bar exam. Like I was a one-dimensional human focused solely on activities that were not only honoring, but were actually completely contrary to my values. And so that was like a whoa moment for me. But even more alarming, I realized that this was the first time in my entire life that I'd ever contemplated what I actually cared about, because it just never felt relevant to me until that time. It was always about what I thought I should be doing because it was prestigious or valued by others. So that was the initial, oh my God, moment that created that dissonance in my mind that led me to start contemplating, well, what would honor my values? And so coming back to the present day with the values discovery guide I have, but you could do this anyway, is look at a list of values and narrow it down to the 3 to 5 things that are really most important to you. Then define to yourself what those values actually mean to you, because different words can mean different things to different people. So like a lot of people could say, oh, I value freedom. But that can mean financial freedom, financial security. That can mean freedom with your time, freedom with your relationships. It can mean a whole different things. And it doesn't matter what it means to anyone else. It matters what it means to you. So figure out what that means. And then honestly assess yourself on like, how well are you currently honoring that value right now on a scale of 1 to 10? And then what that will empower you to do is take stock of where you are right now and then identify concrete steps that you could take to say, how could I be a little bit more in alignment? What I always recommend for people is like, you can think, what would it take to get me to a 10 on all these values 3 years down the line? But I think the most immediate place to start is like, what could I do to increase my score on this value by 0.5 tomorrow if I'm feeling out of alignment? Because I think it's really easy to fantasize about these giant transformations, but say, oh, but I can't do that right now because, and then not actually take moment now. And the truth is like, we can always do something now to increase those scores if we're actually being intentional about it.
When I had outlined, maybe a hack or something that I like to do or share when I'm helping someone cultivate discipline is to focus on their inputs. And, that means curating the Instagram feed, removing as much friction as you can when it comes to training in the morning or at night, like setting out the clothes, buying a new pair of shoes, a home
Mm-hmm.
gym membership, whatever the thing is. And so he was already doing that. And, you kind of had outlined it when we were just talking about how it's important at 1 degree, that incremental improvement, right? No one heals in a straight line. Progress doesn't happen in a straight line. But he had
Yeah.
said himself, maybe I just need to lower the bar. And what you were saying reminded me of that. So
Yeah.
let's say he was speaking to you and he was
Mm-hmm.
outlining his desire to get healthy or, get his mindset to a place where he's trying to take another step with his life. And, obviously a lot of this was stemming from and rooted in a lack of fulfillment within his life. How would you approach that situation?
What I would do for this person coming to me now, I think going back to what you said about values, the first question is why? Like, why do you want to do this? Why is this actually important to you? And so rooting the desired behavior change to the underlying value, because that itself is shown to make you more effective in doing it. Then I would say, again, if they've been struggling to actually start this activity, I would say, make the activity so small that your brain is, if you can't, is almost like, why bother? And then do that every day or every other day, whatever the training regimen says, for 1 week until that's easy, until that's habitual. Why? Because what you're doing right now is you're setting the bar too high and you're not doing it at all. And every time you go to do it, you're like, that feels too big. I'm not going to do it. And then now you've assumed this identity of someone who doesn't do the thing, who said they wanted to do the thing, but can't actually follow through on themselves. So what you're doing here is you're training your brain that you're able to honor this commitment to yourself. Then you can build on it once you do that. The other thing to note is, I'm going back to the self-compassion thing, because this is, I think, the most insanely just game-changing research of anything that I do, which is, how do we try to motivate ourselves? Many people, we try to fuel ourselves with fear. And then if we don't hit what we want, we beat ourselves up. And we think that, if I beat myself up, then I'll be more likely to do it next time. It'll motivate my improvement. And what Kristin Neff has shown is that actually self-criticism, self-flagellation does not at all enhance our motivation. And self-compassion, which involves treating ourselves. So first, mindfulness, just noting and validating our emotions. Like, oh, this is really painful. This is really disappointing. I'm feeling a lot of shame right now because I didn't do this thing. Noting the common humanity of that. So what got in the way here? What prevented me from doing that thing this time? How can I make a plan so that I can overcome that hurdle next time and actually keep us moving forward? So it's the opposite of being weak, complacent, and lazy. And yet that is so exactly where so many people's minds go when they think about. So I would say to this person, start small and focus on consistency, and then build that up, remembering your why. And if you end up, having a slip up, just don't miss twice. And so it's okay to miss once. Treat yourself with self-compassion. It's human. You're fallible. Look at what got in the way and make a plan for how you can do it tomorrow, and just keep moving.
I've learned over time, but specifically this year with community, how valuable it is. So maybe you could speak a bit in the time that we have left about how valuable relationships and community can be in supercharging your operating system, and why people may not be aware of that, just like I wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships are so important on every level. So just starting with basic physical health. The Surgeon General's report showed that our relationships impact our health more than any other factor, including diet, exercise, and even smoking. Like, loneliness literally kills. And having bad relationships and lack of social support kills. And positive emotions can just lift us up so much. And it's the science again. I'll give you two examples of this. One on like a neuroscience level, and then another one on a behavioral level. How positive social connection literally changes our brains in ways that enable us to, putting aside the feeling better, actually perform better. So one is, every time that we have a positive social connection, our brains release oxytocin, which immediately brings down our anxiety, increases our concentration, focus, and ability to perform optimally. It also reduces the level of cortisol, which enables us to recover more quickly from the physical effects of stress. So negating the negative effects of stressful experiences on our body. And so some studies show as far that having positive relationships can actually cancel out the negative effects of stressful experiences on our lifespan. But beyond that, in behavioral studies, they found that having a strong social support network actually reduces the extent to which we view challenges as stressful in the first place. And so in one study, they had participants stand at the base of a steep hill and to gauge how steep they thought the hill was and how hard it would be to climb. And what they found was that if participants stood with a friend, they gauged the hill as being less steep than participants who stood by themselves. And even when they were just imagining one of their friends, they viewed the hill as being less steep. And what the researchers concluded is that when we know that we have people who have our back and can support us, challenges literally feel less scary and we feel more capable to surmount those obstacles and more willing to take them on. So when you think about how empowering this is, it's really remarkable. And just in terms of the key hallmarks of motivation and engagement, autonomy is one of them, meaningfulness, another, mastery, and then relatedness, belonging. It's so important. And so what prevents us from tapping into these things? I think one is just not recognizing the value and thinking that social connection is a trivial distraction from like important things that we should be focusing on and need to get done. And the tendency to hunker down under stress, not realizing that even microbursts of positive connection, they don't need to take a lot of time, can turbocharge our performance as well as our well-being. I think another thing, and this is especially in the legal profession, is like this adversarial competitive mindset that like lifting you up would be effectively pushing me down, where I think it starts with the curve in law school, right? That with this sharp elbows that, stars have to rise to the top by themselves, not realizing how much stronger we are together. And I think it really comes from like this scarcity mindset that like, if you rise, I'm falling, not that like we can together lift each other up in a way that will make both of us soar higher than we would have otherwise. And I think that is just, it's something you see it different. In business schools, you focus a lot on teamwork and those types of things. And like the legal profession, you don't see that at all. It's very much like all men and women for themselves. And I think it's just, it's so misguided. And I think it prevents so many people from not only being as happy as they could be, but also realizing their potential.
There's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'd like to pose to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now, assuming she's in that ideal spot, were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think she would say to you?
Oh, I know. I think I know what she would say. And this actually goes to something that you and I were talking about before we started recording about our businesses, but also when you were talking about the mindfulness and your breath work and how that impacted your performance. I think that my future self would say to me right now, Jordana, allow yourself to slow down so you can speed up, because I'm reaching a place in the growth of my business right now. There's so many exciting things happening and there's been so much growth. And I know this is something, Jonathan, that resonates with you. And I think I know what the next level will be. I think that I need to say, oh, that next zone of genius, in order to create space to figure out how to bring myself into that next zone of genius, I need to stop doing some of the zone of excellence stuff right now, which is a really uncomfortable thing for, high performing, driven people who are always doing. And so that actually is going to be a big challenge that I'm coming up against. And I'm going to be doing exactly what we've talked about, which is I think really tethering myself to my why, and why I want to move and make those changes, to fortify myself against the anxious responses from my brain when it's like, what are you doing slowing down? We don't do that. And so I think that's what I'll go with for now.
I love it. I think she'll be super proud of you, and whatever that next step is for you, I'm excited to see what it is. And I'm sure the audience is, after everything that you had to share today. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Jordana Confino or Instagram, much more so on LinkedIn than Instagram, though, Jordana Confino. And my website is jordanaconfino.com. You can find the values discovery guide that we talked to on there, and also my blog, Chronicles of a Recovering Type A Plus Perfectionist, which is exactly what it sounds like. And thank you so much for inviting me to do this with you, Jonathan. It was awesome.
Well, you lived up to the hype. This was a blast. I look forward to having you on in the future as you continue to climb, and stay tuned.
Oh yeah, I'll see you around the foxhole.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in.